Thank you all for joining us for Pando Days. My name is Shirley. I'm the president of Pando Populous, an environmental and social impact accelerator based in Los Angeles County. Pando Days brings the art, design, architecture, and sustainability programs together from 10 Southland colleges and universities to help LA County implement its ambitious new sustainability plan. Each of the participating Pando Days institutions adopted a different goal from the county's plan and created ingenious plans of their own for implementing it. Brainstorming began in the fall of last year with project development over as many as 7 months. Make sure you go to our website, pandopopulous.com, to see all the project descriptions and their deliverables. We're posting them on a rolling basis between now and the latter part of this month. All 10 of the premier events follow the same format, hosted by a member of the Pando Board of Directors with a summary presentation of the featured project by the team lead. We then have short responses and questions from members of the Chief Sustainability Officer Strategic for LA County and a period of public Q&A. We'll close by the end of the hour. All projects are being assessed by a panel of judges based on recordings of these presentations and the project deliverables. When we come together on July 25 for the finale, we'll hear which projects they believe have the greatest chance for the greatest impact for county sustainability. The Pando Days host for today is Devon Workman. Devon is a member of the Pando Board of Directors. He's an architect, founder of the home energy retrofit organization CHIRP, which many of you will know something about. He's creating the first nonprofit solar factory in the world based in Pomona, targeting jobs and solar panels in overlooked communities. He's a great visionary who knows exactly what it's like to bring big ideas down to earth of his own, and we're delighted to have him at this premier event for us today. Devon, thank you very much, and over to you.
Thank you so much, Eugene. I'm very excited to welcome all of you to this afternoon's presentation. I am really delighted to introduce this afternoon's presenters, which is from the School of Cal Poly Pomona, right here in our neck of the woods in Pomona. The project title is Food Within Reach. They're addressing the county sustainability goal number 10. That goal is a sustainable and just food system that enhances access to affordable, local, and healthy food. So this project envisions interconnected foodways every quarter mile across Los Angeles County, conceived and built by residents in public spaces or accessible private land, with the goals of bridging capital and cultural gaps between eaters, seeders, and feeders. Our presenters this afternoon are Kathleen Blackistone, co-creator of Moonwater Farm and a master's student in regenerative studies. Along with her is Dr. Aaron Fox and Stephen Archambault, both of the Don Huntley College of Agriculture, also located in Cal Poly Pomona. I'd like to share with you all a couple of my reactions today, just as a lead in to the discussion. This subject really struck a chord with me. If you can all see this, this is a memory, although it's not me or my family, but it's exact memory that I had growing up in Kansas in the 50s and spending time on our family farm in Ohio that went back 3 generations back to the Civil War. I felt rooted on that land. I could dig my hands in that land and not be worried about poisoning myself. We were supplying food for all of the local communities. Somehow over the last 60 years, we've decided that multinational corporations should be in charge of our local economies and our food economy. This is what Kansas looks like can't get my screen to advance. This is what Kansas looks like today. I don't know anybody who thinks this is a good idea, except for the multinational corporations supplying the capital and the pesticides and the fertilizers to grow this food, which is destroying the land, producing food that is oftentimes loaded with glyphosate and other chemicals that's not edible. And it's not regenerative in any sense. In fact, 60 more rotations of this kind of farming and all the arable land in this entire country will be unusable. So I think it's in all of our assumptions these days and the way that we know that this is unsustainable and that really this is where we all need to be headed. These are pictures in this corner here from China in an organic rice farm. This is Midwestern animal husbandry. And these two pictures below are local from Claremont and Pomona, an organization called Uncommon Good, and several other organizations are focused on bringing back what we all know to be regenerative and healthy. One of the other beautiful things about the website that struck me from this project, Food Within Reach, is the artwork. This is a very striking diagram and metaphor, in my opinion, the corazon of Pomona, the heart of Pomona. It has particular resonance for me because on this map, this is a CalEnviroScreen map identifying the highest negative impacted census tracts and cities in our state from an environmental and other vulnerability perspectives. So yes, we need to re-envision the heart of our cities and move back from an unsustainable future. So this final drawing that I'll show you from Elk Pen on their website struck me because it does remind me of the way I used to feel in Kansas, but now it is really more than 1,000 words. It's also, for me, 1,000 memories. And I think for all of us, it creates 1,000 aspirations. So this particular project is focused on hyper-local food economy networks, trying to focus our lives and re-engage us around the issues of human health, local economic development, and resilience. And I can't think of a better place for it to be started than Pomona. Pomona City Council is welcoming and proactive. They are voted as, they voted themselves to be a compassionate city where people can have a refuge, and they're looking to rebuild from the bottom up opportunities. So I would like to introduce this team for the presentation to us this afternoon. And so let's hear from Kathleen Blackistone, Dr. Aaron Fox, and Stephen Archambault. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Devon. That was a beautiful introduction. I wanted to thank Pando for inviting me to participate in this event and to be part of the Cal Poly Pomona team that's focused on food systems. And let me begin by acknowledging that I'm sitting on Tongva land. The Tongva people tended these fertile valleys of LA County prior to the Spaniards' arrival. And I invite you to discover the land you are sitting on and the confluence of legacies that bring you to stand where you are. I was fortunate enough to partner with two amazing professors from the Ag School at Cal Poly Pomona, Dr. Aaron Fox and Dr. Stephen Archambault, both of which I've been able to study with in my master's studies. So I'll just start with sharing my screen and going through our PowerPoint. We did not have the video capacities on our team this time around, so we're here in the old school PowerPoint. I hope that's okay with everybody. So that was a great introduction and kind of said a few of the things that I was already going to say. So we definitely have this context of food within reach, and we want to connect the next food economy. Oh, let's see, how do I get my, I can't get my slides to share. There we go, okay. So we heard from Devon, that's a sustainable, just food system that enhances access to affordable and local food. You know, food is really central to our health and well-being, our economic resilience, and very importantly, cultural heritage, and can be a facilitator of the self-preservation of communities. At the city level, this goal is being pursued through Good Purchasing Program, that is aimed at public institutions and the way they purchase food so that it's more transparent and equitable. And as Devon already noticed, what we are doing is focusing at the hyper local level on communities that are often overlooked. So our vision is a foodway every quarter mile. And we chose a quarter mile because this is really a reasonable amount of length that most everyone can walk, even an elder. We want to begin in the communities that are most overlooked. While we will be focusing on Pomona, they're Southgate, Cudahy, Watts, Willowbrook, Linwood, Maywood, Commerce, Bell Gardens, Huntington Park, Bell, Carson, Almonte. They all fit that Cal Enviro screen that Devon just showed us, where there's the worst environmental pollution, the most poverty, language isolation, and many other relevant factors. What's a foodway? A social, cultural, economic practice relating to the production and consumption of agricultural products. I'm particularly using agriculture here so that we include fiber, what we use in our clothing and other parts of our home wares. Essentially, it's where food meets culture and history. We know that the cheap and efficiently produced food has led to heart disease, diabetes, and obesity, and many of the crops grown today lack the nutritional value they had 50 years ago. Most Native and immigrant communities have been separated from their ancestral foods, and we know that healthy, sustainable, and accessible food can relieve these threats of diet-related illness, food insecurity, and social isolation and environmental degradation. I will point out that this project hits a few other goals of the sustainability report, including goal 2, which is building infrastructure that supports human health and resilience. Goal 3, which is development without displacement. And goal 11, which is encouraging participation by disempowered communities. There's an urgency to this matter that our recent pandemic has highlighted. We've perhaps, some of us, witnessed these empty shelves, and we have on display the weaknesses of globalization focus and seeing citizens only as consumers, and the fragility of the supply chain, particularly, I think most of us are aware, in the meat industry. So let's start in our own backyard. Pomona is a community of 150,000 people. It's got 22 square miles, and it averages around 17 to 20% of people below the poverty line, with a gross lack of fresh food access defined as either a supermarket or farmer's market. And we know we could change this. We felt like the actual boundaries of Pomona looked like a heart, and you can see the urban ag center at Cal Poly Pomona highlighted there on the left. This is an interesting map just to hit home again the scale of what we're talking about. these are urban farms and community gardens across Los Angeles. That was a project of the UCLA Urban Planning School. This is a great website, and I've got the resource there at the corner if any of you want to revisit this. Over on the right-hand side that I've outlined is Pomona. And there is the close-up of it, where we can see 2 community gardens and 3 farms, one of which is at the county fairground that is very seasonal. And if I'm not mistaken, this other one is Common Good, which Devon pointed out. So we've really come upon this idea of using an asset-based framework, right? It's very easy to use deficit language, and we want to move away from this very consciously. So we're looking at inclusive community development that uses positive language. Food and culinary practices are often expressions of cultural identity and provide ways of engaging for all ages and skill levels, lending themselves to inclusive community development in really highly visible ways. There are several what I would consider elders in this equitable food-oriented development process here in Los Angeles. Neelam Sharma from Community Services Unlimited and Rudy Espinoza from Inclusive Action. And there is a lot of work that they have already done in this process of developing this framework. So again, these are not our original ideas. We really want to work on the work that's already being done in Los Angeles, because there's a lot of people actively engaged in the food system trying to improve it. Food projects and enterprises are really vehicles for community health and wellness, and invest in the self-determination and leadership of community residents. And this development paradigm is really often quite easy to implement in a variety of local contexts, can be less capital intensive, and is achieved at multiple scales. So it offers the potential for wealth building in neighborhoods that have been excluded from traditional capital. In Los Angeles, these are our communities of color, immigrants, and refugees. Also, food access is a key indicator of community health. And this is what a networked, equitable, food-oriented development engagement might look like. And I want to point out that working with the food system is relational, labor-intensive, and often slow. So this can go against our capitalist framework of, we have to speed things up. So I'm not trying to create excuses. I just want to remind us that it's important that we take time to move through these pieces. I think through this, we can transform community spaces and celebrate identity and heritage, as well as ignite a community-led process that preserves and reclaims traditional food and farming activities. Equitable food-oriented development are great levers in health and community development, because low-income communities have a rich heritage and expertise in food production. Over 50% of the refugees coming into Los Angeles and the United States have an agrarian background. So we'll be calling on this expertise. At this point, I want to turn over to my colleague, Erin Fox, for a description of all of the exciting projects that are happening in this framework at Cal Poly Pomona and will be used as examples in our food convening that we'll talk about after.
Thank you. So I thought I would outline some of the exciting things that we're already doing at Cal Poly Pomona, and really to kind of hit home the idea that we're ready. Cal Poly Pomona is ready to take this on and lead this. And really, what Kathleen has been explaining and what she'll describe in detail later is what we now need is to connect with our communities and really collaborate and use their expertise and their background to really create these foodways. So I thought I would outline a few of the examples that we already have on campus. Everything from regenerative agriculture to heavily technological indoor systems. And again, to kind of show you all sort of where we're headed. So if you go to the next slide, please. So the Lyle Center for Generative Studies at Cal Poly Pomona is an interdisciplinary teaching and outreach and research center. The director, Dr. Pablo Roche, is in attendance right now. The center is really about developing systems that revitalize our world, right? How can we build housing? How can we produce energy? How can we feed ourselves in a way that is beneficial to ourselves and the world? How can we help bring about a better world? So part of that is students producing food in a way that mimics nature, right? How can we produce food in a way that coexists and enhances natural ecosystems? And what we're starting to work on right now, in the next slide, is connecting that food production at the Lyle Center to the campus food pantry. A recent study showed that 40% of students in the California State University system are food insecure. That means that at any given point in a week, 40% of our students are hungry. They do not know where the next meal is going to come from. They do not have the access they need to nourish themselves. And so, like many universities, Cal Poly Pomona has taken upon itself to develop a food pantry to try and address that food security. And like many food pantries, one of the challenges is bringing fresh fruits and vegetables, really nutrient dense, really healthy food into those food pantries. And so the Lyle Center is currently working on trying to bring those fresh fruits and vegetables into the food pantry. Another project that we have on campus right now showcasing another example of a potential foodway is the culinary garden. The students have called the Horse Hill Micro Farm. This is a student-led endeavor. We teach a lot of our urban agriculture classes up here. The current student farm manager, a senior at Cal Poly Pomona, Stephen Espinosa, is in the audience right now. One of the primary purposes for this culinary garden, for this micro farm, is to produce fresh fruits and vegetables for the campus fine dining restaurant that's attached to the hospitality school at Cal Poly Pomona. But I think one thing that's interesting to point out is that in the current pandemic, the restaurant is closed down. What is the purpose of this micro farm? Urban farms and these local foodways are so important during these times because they're adaptable, they're flexible. And so these local farms can then maneuver and turn and address what the community needs, right? They may not be providing fresh fruits and vegetables for the restaurant anymore, but they can quickly adapt to providing those fresh fruits and vegetables for the immediate community. Next slide. We also have a 4,000 square foot urban agriculture greenhouse. This is high-tech indoor agriculture, everything from hydroponics to an aquaponics system that Dr. Stephen Archambault has really been spearheading. You know, there's a lot of opportunities here when you start thinking about urban agriculture and limited opportunities to access to land, maybe toxic soil. Through this types of technology, we can be growing indoors. We can be, you know, really utilizing urban spaces. Dr. Archambault has also been spending a lot of time, you know, really figuring out the feasibility and financial aspects of this by reducing input costs, especially through the aquaponics that cycle a lot of the nutrients between fish and plants. Next slide. And I'll hand it over to Kathleen from there, but thank you all for giving me the opportunity to showcase some of what we're already doing at Cal Poly Pomona.
Thank you. So just in closing, I think repeating maybe a little bit, but just recognizing that this urban agriculture center is quite unique in the country, right? We've had a tendency, as Devon pointed out, to focus on big acres and not consider urban agriculture as a possibility. And while we'll never grow all the food that our 14 million residents need in our urban cities of Los Angeles, there is a lot of value in urban agriculture to connect. And we are very fortunate in having a youth leadership development class that is being offered in the coming year that has been financed, that will really help students lead this community engagement and recruitment process for our project. So let's go back to the equitable food oriented development and talk about what are we actually going to do. We had hoped to meet with our community members and come to you with more specifics of what the next steps would be, because we know that this is an important piece of the puzzle. Due to COVID, this did not happen. So our next steps are going to be the meeting and the convening of community members in Pomona. We want to use, again, this framework of, I'm going to call it EFOD, Equitable Food Oriented Development Values, which places equity and justice first, is very place-based, and uses market business strategies as a means for developing sustainable economic opportunities for residents. And it's consistently looking at ways for community leadership development and engagement with community organizations. So this means that the board of directors is headed by the people in the community. This means that there's cooperative ownership as well. And there's really a lot of overlap between EFOD and placemaking. It's a practice that really has evolved between practitioners and those in the health and development field. So our goal is really to say, where are we now? Where do we want to be, and how do we make that happen? So we created a toolkit that I believe is posted on the Pando website that could be a templated kind of flexible document that could then go out into other communities and help lead this discussion. So we're going to let our community residents be their cultural bearers and preserve their neighborhoods while engaging them in their own environmental interests and establishing, hopefully, green spaces. This community-based building reveals residents' values, their visions and goals, and a key part of the convening when everybody comes together is to map the resources that are there in the room and outside of the room, right? So we have representatives from all across the city that share what skills are there, what financial resources do we have, where is there land and space for the project, and what are the key pieces of the food system that we might need in terms of distribution, waste recycling. You know, it's very large in scope, and we took a systems approach to this so that we would not leave any of the pieces out. It's a very kind of transdisciplinary study that uses economics, sociology, regenerative studies, agriculture, business. And we know we want to, in this process, identify the folks in the community who are the leaders and end with a distinct definition of what the milestones of any action plan would be. Essentially, I think what comes out of this is a vocation of place, meaning that the residents really get a chance to define what it is they want their neighborhood and city to feel and be like. So I put the Urban Ag Center up there as the kind of infrastructure holder, the container, if you will, but we see this very much as a network of front yards, church grounds, school yards, vacant lots, vacant buildings, and other expressions of the community's desires to show their food and cultural heritage. This, I don't know if everybody can see this too well, is a page out of the toolkit that is the agenda. And it really shows the kind of steps that can be taken in terms of what gets focused on, where people would meet, and what the description is of each of those pieces. This happens to be framed for our meeting that we would do, but this is the piece that can be very flexible, and in the toolkit is written in a much more broad-based language to encourage each community to come up with their own goals. For us, we wanted to preserve local control and long-term community ownership. We want to decrease the alienation from local seats of power, explore the foodway opportunities, and increase public accountability and transparency. So we will also want to move from a transactional situation into something that we would consider more transformational. So in terms of training and skill sharing, we know there's a lot already in the community. We have a lot at the Urban Ag Center. And so we want to use this agroecological model that would really inspire community engagement and see the Cal Poly Urban Ag Center as the holder of a lot of the maybe written, much the way Pando has done for these days, hold on to the written descriptions. These are very important partners that we would need to include for anything involved in Pomona. There's 5 CSUs, so there's a lot of information, Cal State programs that are already in Southern California. Inclusive Action is one of the folks in downtown that's one of the authors of the Equitable Food-Oriented Development White Paper. Urban Mission is already doing a lot of work in Pomona. There's the Pomona Economic Opportunities Center that is a key player in finding folks work. And there's also a Downtown Pomona Owners Association. And I already mentioned the Urban Ag Youth Leadership Program through the curriculum at the Cal Poly. So really our future vision is to have this sense of place and reach a larger audience with less resources over time, and transform community spaces into places that really celebrate our identity and heritage and ignite a creative community-led process that preserve and reclaim food and farming traditions. They'll establish networks for the training, skill sharing, and knowledge sharing. And it's not to say that it's without challenges. There are some key things we know from this work being done across the country over the last 10 or 15 years. And that one is momentum can be difficult to keep up. Consensus can be often challenging, dealing with opposition and apathy, as well as where is the funding and capacity coming for these projects? And are the farmers and food availability really going to want to engage? But knowing that, we see the hope in really engaging our communities and having this discussion and figuring out together how we move forward with specifics. That's what I have right now.
Okay, thank you so much, Kathleen. Very, very inspiring. I've got 1,000 questions, and I know all of you do. So the way we've decided to move forward with that is to have the entire group be able to engage with you, to be able to ask questions and get more specific responses. But first of all, what we'd like to do is introduce 5 members, or maybe 4 today, of our Chief Sustainability Officer Strategic Task Force for LA County. And they would be, as I introduce each one of them, they could offer a couple short responses and ask a question to kind of start the question and answer session off. And then when we're through with the sustainability officers, we'll open it up to Adam and moderate some public question and answers. So first of all, I'd like to introduce Russell Greene, who's retired from the Cheesecake Factory, where he served as Executive Vice President of Operations and Sustainability. So Russell, thanks for being with us today, and share some of your reactions and any questions you might have.
Thank you, Devon, and Kathleen, Aaron, thank you for that presentation. You said you were inspired, Devon, and that's exactly the word that I jotted down. And in the full sense of that being that it was so full of spirit of what is possible. I was very moved by the humanness of it when I went through the materials in advance of your presentation, how connected it is to our shared experience as humans living on this earth in concert with all of the other species, and how smart it was and how feasible it seemed. You addressed some of my concerns in terms of some of the potential opposition and timelines and such. I also wanted to note that I was impressed that it did check off more than one of the sustainability goals, which I thought was also very impressive, and thank you for pointing that out. I also would just like to quickly just add on to the praise on the artwork and the tone of the presentation. That was elk pen, just beautiful, and the means where being fed happens, walkable resiliency, fallow to fulfill, just gorgeous. So thank you for a very inspired presentation. I know there's many questions, and I'll be brief in asking one. I think that you spoke about patience. One of the lines I was drawn to was that developing community capital is based on patience. And you alluded to patience again in your comments today, although I think we all know that the faster we could do something like this, the faster the community would benefit. So if you could speak to that notion of speed and what is the thing in the way, the barriers to doing it more quickly, and the importance of patience in the full blossoming of this type of an idea.
I appreciate that. And I think the community piece is often the slow piece. If we're really going to include everybody we want to, and I'm delighted by looking, I can only scan the comments, but there's already many folks saying, how do I get involved? So there's a lot of people, as I mentioned, already doing this work. We cannot overlook anybody who's made this their work for the last few years. I'm personally very passionate because I've been doing the work here in Compton for the last 5 years. Dr. Fox and Dr. Archambault are leading the charge at Cal Poly for many years. We know there are a lot of people in Los Angeles County that are doing this work. And so I only wanted to caution the speed piece so that we don't overlook an important voice, and or develop adaptive management principles that let us bring in new voices, right? So that we understand this is a constantly changing document. Same thing with the toolkit. This is literally just a line for right now, today, to have this discussion. I'm sure there's many on this call that would enlarge, edit, shift some of the notions so that we get closer to what it is we need to do. None of us are technically from Pomona right now. And so there couldn't be anything more important than dealing with the folks who are already there and on the ground and doing the work. I think there are small projects that are probably quite affordable and can be implemented rather swiftly. And there's money out there. I didn't mention this through Kresge, and they're in our document, help initiatives. So we know there's resources, but again, it can take time to get those resources. If you're going through a grant funding process, that is not fast. So I think if we wanted something fast, sure, we could do a pop-up to show that we did it. But the point of this project is longevity and true sustainable economic capacity for the individuals who have, you know, traditionally been marginalized by redlining, by policies. So, you know, we want to change the design, and I think it's okay to go slow. Land work is slow, you know, and then when you look back over 5 years and see what the land's capacity is to regenerate, you realize that 5 years really isn't slow, right? We think in terms of our one life, when in indigenous communities, they think in terms of 7 generations. So that's the only reason I just want to kind of have a capacity to not need to do the most fabulous thing in the shortest amount of time.
Thank you, Russell. Thank you, Kathleen. Next, I'd like to introduce Sister Dolores Mitch. Sister Dolores Mitch is coming to us from the Maryknoll Sisters in Monrovia, and she's on the point team for Pando at Maryknoll, heading up the reorientation of their convent property to meet the needs of sustainability for LA County, and has been the key person in Monrovia for advising on sustainability matters. Sister Dolores.
Thank you, Devon. I'm very happy to be with you this afternoon. And I'd just like to mention that, as with several of the other people that are listed up there, I'm also retired, actively retired, I would like to say. I've probably never been more busy than I am now. And we have actually a point team. So I am one of the 3 of us who are involved in the Pando project here on our property. And in my experience with Pando, I have been very blessed to be exposed to many events and happenings. This is one of them, and the Pando Days in general, and it really has been eye-opening and very fruitful for me. And I would like to thank Kathleen and Stephen for such a wonderful presentation. And I must say that when I even read over the presentation materials beforehand, I was very, very impressed with your project and what you are doing there. And a couple of things that really impressed me very much is how you brought in the cultural and the social, and how these are very important. You know, the cultural, that the different ethnic groups there, and even how the food is so interconnected with the culture, and it's just remarkable. And the social, with the community being involved. So it's not just economics, it's not just growing food, but it's all of those things that, and how they are very interconnected. So I was very impressed with the whole thing. And also the art was very beautiful. Then as far as my question goes, looking over especially the presentation materials, I guess the thing I really want to know the most about is what you talked about, the scaling up, and what would be some examples of scaling up. You mentioned the transactional versus the transformational. And I think I have only kind of a vague idea of that. It seems like the transactional is not as good as the transformative. But if you could give me a few examples of that. And even in that presentation, as it was described there, you have some letters that were not explained. So MGs, I think are perhaps our master gardeners, I'm not really sure. And the CSU is perhaps Cal State University, I'm not really sure of that either. So I would appreciate maybe if you could say a little bit about those things. Thank you.
Thank you, Sister Dolores. Yes, I overlooked the MG. I think I ran out of space on the slide. So we imagined the network of knowledge being managed much the way the master gardeners are managed through the UC Cooperative Extension. And so there is a series of trainings that go on, and then you're qualified, and then you go out into the community and share your skills on a volunteer basis. And so we imagine that this, the transformational piece, the scaling up, is we start in communities and have a network of skills. So we start in Pomona, and then the next project's in Compton, and we wind up having maybe complementary skills, and it involves making sure that people from each community know that there are others in this network of equitable food development that they can lean on for resources. So a lot of times we keep things sort of behind closed doors and hidden, and our vision is a transparent model. And CSU, yes, is the Cal State University system. So there is a group of the 5 Cal State universities of Southern California in one cohort. And we don't even have a garden at Cal State LA. So we felt that there was capacity even within the Cal State system to build capacity. And then scaling up, starting in Pomona and having a successful project or maybe 2, and then doing the similar thing in Compton, in Southgate. So we have networks of people across the Southland that are doing equitable food-oriented development. How do we create a network that weaves us together and create this paradigm shift that we're looking for, where we would never think of doing a food development project without connecting to our community?
Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Thank you so much. Next, I'd like to turn to Mark. Mark Spears, member of our team, and also an actively retired from Chief of Sustainability Officer for Disney. So Mark, take it away.
Devon, thank you, and I appreciate it. Thank you, Kathleen and Aaron, and I guess a silent partner, Stephen, for the work that's done. Exceptional. I echo everything that both Richard and Sister Dolores have offered. My takeaway when I went through the materials, a couple of things. Besides being comprehensive, it also has a vision of immediate feasibility or possibility, and then also the inclusion aspect of the community is vital and obviously important to its success. A main question that I had got perhaps a little more tactically to the construction of these gardens and the integration within the community and the ability to reuse or repurpose materials and supplies that may exist, so that we're looking both at cost, but we're also looking at the repurposing of the actual construction. And then perhaps if you could talk a little bit more about the educational opportunities that are related to this. I understand you referenced the Youth Leadership Development Program. You also talked about the MGs and building some capacity for sharing amongst communities as part of the scaling process. But do you also envision a broader educational opportunity for the younger members of the community as well as the broader participants? Thank you.
I may need you to say the first part again. I think it was about reusing resources.
It was, yes.
And those hopefully would come out of the community meeting. I want to share an example of why I mention this. We know folks over at East Yard Communities, and there were a group of folks who wanted to grow their own medicine. And they brought themselves together, were able to figure out who had physical space in their front yard. They needed soil. Somebody worked at the cemetery and they used that soil and were able to start growing medicine. So I want to, use that as an example of something very, maybe might seem small, but they were able on a very small budget to get their wants met. Right? And so this isn't just about growing food. It might be a space that we all come together, okay, not right this minute, but hopefully in the future and not too distant future, just convening and sharing food and stories together. So a foodway has this very flexible capacity to, you know, let many different ideas come in. And it isn't to say that we, you know, so is a street vendor, so is a restaurant. I mean, so is an aquaponic farm, right? These are all different projects that can be considered. And there are ways of doing crop swaps where people are growing food or medicine and come together and share those things. And then the knowledge sharing, our vision is really this idea of, like, if we look at who's on this call today, and again, I'm not able to read the chat too well just because I have to pay attention, but it's extraordinary. And there's 50 people here. So can you imagine if we were all in the room and we were doing the mapping exercise? It's quite thrilling for me to think about. And what we need is the container to capture that. So the Urban Ag Center at Cal Poly can build a network of a database and other ideas that bring the capacity to share knowledge together. So through publications, through writing, and we really want to honor this face-to-face. So I love the one component I do love about Zoom is it started, you know, you get to kind of be exposed to so much richness in our city without having to drive there. Or, you know, we do need internet access, but I read today that 91% of the people in Pomona have some kind of internet access. So that's pretty high. And we should not forget those 10% who don't. And that's why these community face-to-face is so important. And you know, the makeup of the people is going to look very different than many who I can see on the screen right here, right? It's for us to, our stepping up is stepping back so that their voice is what we're listening to.
Can I make one quick comment here? I think Mark also, you asked about reaching out to young people and how we deliver that message to them. The great thing at Cal Poly Pomona, we already have a really strong community education component where a lot of local schools come and learn from us on site, and they see our farms and our you know, they interact with animals. They find out, you know, how food is grown, and we're interacting with a lot of schools. And some of my own colleagues have been going to schools and helping with school gardens and things like that. So we're well equipped to roll this out and this kind of information with students. So definitely, it's an important.
Fantastic, Stephen. Thank you.
I broke my silence there too. So
that's good. Good.
That's
Need some
fantastic.
screen time.
Thank you, Stephen. Thank you, Mark. We've got about 5 minutes. I don't think it'll hurt if we go over 3 or 4 minutes, but I'd like to bring Adam into the conversation here because Adam has been watching the chat. And maybe Adam, in the few minutes remaining, maybe you could sort through and present to Kathleen and the presenters the most salient questions that you can see that are remaining.
Thank you, Devon. Beautiful presentation and some beautiful remarks in the chat. Starting with Michael Whitmer, who is a local, who works locally with Sustainable Food Alliance and a collaboration of urban farmers, food activists, and policy wonks, and keenly interested in collaborating and connecting to Cal Poly, which kind of brings me also to an overall question of this foodway incubator, which is what you're kind of, the model is what you're presenting here. Is that something that will always remain existing within Pomona? Is that the right location, or does it need to grow to something outside of the Institute?
I'll let Dr. Fox or Dr. Archambault answer that.
Sure. Yeah, I've been thinking about this a little bit from a number of the questions that's been asked. You know, I think a lot of what we're proposing is an inventory of the resources that we all have. a university is a really good example because we have a wide variety of resources. And it's a great place to start in the sense that we can connect with our community and learn about the resources that we can share and collaborate on. But I think that can happen on many different scales, right? From a city block and just folks getting to know their neighbors and finding out kind of what knowledge and resources and land and space and technology everybody has. So I could see this really, starting with a very purposeful, concerted effort, but really growing organically from there. The CSUs were brought up earlier, and we're in conversations right now with the Cal State University schools in Los Angeles County. We're the only one that has a College of Agriculture, but each one of them has interest and desire to connect and help promote and create these community-based foodways. And we're starting to learn about what each of our campuses has to offer, and is there a way that we can create synergies across the campus, or across the county. So it is exciting to see kind of how this could expand and grow from here.
But you have so many resources with the Lyle Center and so forth that you could truly be a leader, a center, I can imagine this would be like an open source that you give it away, the thinking, but still you can lead so many things with the resources that you have.
Yeah, and I think, to get kind of, what's exciting to me really too is also to think about sort of this idea of transformational rather than transactional, right? Typically it's me, the professor, the expert, telling you what to do, and then I leave, right? But how can we change that model so that it's everyone coming together, everyone kind of, bringing their values, their knowledge, their resources, their motivation, and again, kind of looking at the inventory of what resources and what knowledge do we bring, and how can we all learn and grow from each other, and how can we, build stronger communities together.
I remember the first time I bumped into the transactional versus transformational is from feminism, that the difference between male and female leadership is that men is transactional, you do this for me and I'll do, and transformational, the female way, the feminine way is I empower you too. Which is the transformational aspect, which I find so beautiful and totally Mother Earth. Someone asks me to address the audience questions. I'm so sorry. There is here Juanita Preciado, who writes, Pomona Environmental Advocacy for Community Health, PEACH, has conducted an environmental assessment identifying informal green spaces in Pomona. We are now working on analyzing community gardens, urban agriculture, and their contribution to social ecological resilience during COVID-19. This research has been funded by City of Hope. We would also like to connect with Pal Polly. Can you provide a point of contact? And yeah, again, another person from the community who's wishing to connect so deeply.
And so, yeah, I mean, just a quick point. I mean, I think that to some degree, this sort of represents us trying to kind of break out of a traditional model of a university where we're really isolated from the community that we're geographically located. And so in the chat box, I put my email, and I said, start by connecting with me, along with me and Dr. Archambault that's here. There's a number of professors at Cal Poly Pomona that are working actively in the community. Dr. Teresa Yoro is one that comes to mind. I'd be happy to get you all in touch with her and the work she's doing with Pomona Valley Farmers Market, and the coalition of farmers and community members she's connected with. So yeah, I think, you know, this is what's a really exciting opportunity here today, is that, you know, we're starting to crack some of those barriers, and, you know, just each other and start seeing, you know, okay, these are all the awesome things that y'all are doing. These are all the awesome things that we're doing. You know, here's another organization that's, you know, working in the same community, but we don't know each other yet. And now is the opportunity to start getting to know each other and see where we can connect and create synergies.
And I
Thank
think,
you so
Anna,
much.
there was, just to finish up, there was a barrier of getting local institutions to buy local food. And I think that ties right into this good food purchasing program that the city of Los Angeles is doing. And it can often be a challenge for organizations that don't have the political will to engage. And so I think the LA Food Policy Council has a number of strategic actions going on to make good food purchasing program more enticing to somebody like PUSD or retirement communities. So it's a matter of finding the scale of food that those organizations need, but it's often just 20% or something like that, which will at least qualify them in that program. So I think that was Christy Pace asking those questions.
In some ways, I think it was mentioned earlier, but Pomona is in somewhat better shape than other communities where city council is really on board with incorporating urban agriculture into development, economic development in Pomona. So I think those conversations may be easier in Pomona actually than other places. But I think a lot of times it's bringing people to the table and discussing what's possible. So definitely, I think that's something we envision too.
So we're unfortunately out of time. I know we could go on for a lot longer. I know all of you are as stimulated and would like to know more as I am. What we've heard this afternoon, I think, is a deeply thoughtful and reflective suite of solutions that are addressing some massive problems. And as they all suggested, especially Aaron, he was saying that they are ready for action. They are now engaged in this process. And Kathleen was asking for people to reach out and to help. They are in responsive mode, ready to move forward. And I would encourage everyone on the call to do that. The food movement is slow, but that's a feature, not a bug. And together we can push things through a lot faster. So we want to thank you all for joining Pando Days. We hope you're getting a lot out of these experiences together. We hope that you will share this with your friends and associates, because we believe that we can only accomplish these things if we proceed together. So thank you all for joining us, and the recording of this session will be on the website. So please share that and stay in touch.
Okay, thank you so much, Devon, for hosting this event. Thanks to you, Kathleen, Aaron, and Stephen, and the entire Cal Poly team for creating such a fascinating initiative. PandoPopThis.com is where everyone can see the recording of this and all of the various school initiatives for Pando Days. Many thanks to the members of the CSO task force who responded today: Russell Greene, Dolores, Mitch, and Mark Spears. Many thanks to Pando Days curator Adam Ewens, festival producer Shelley Goldstein, producer Betsy Hunter, and presentation consultant Judith Parker. Pando Days was conceived with the help of the CSO Strategic Task Force and made possible by the Conrad N. Hilton Foundation, Second Home, the Maryknoll Sisters, and many others. Make sure to join us this coming Friday at 1 o'clock for the premiere presentation by Otis College of Art and Design of their new initiative, Green Map and Go. A preview of it on our website right now. Thank you again for joining us, and have a great afternoon.